I told y'all I'd have you out of here at a decent hour, so y'all got to work with me. All right, we're coming to, this is one of my most exciting parts of this workshop because it is a workshop. All right, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at resource evangelism, and that's going to be talking about the resources that we use in the church to evangelize with, as well as to edify our members with, and things like that. So we're going to be looking at some of these practical ideas. Now, there again, as I mentioned on the outset, some of these may work for you, some of them may not. Make what works work, okay? There's nothing I don't think that I'm going to share here today that is licensed, copyrighted, or protected, okay? Now, do keep in mind, if you are copying materials, some of those are copyrighted, and it's not right for us to violate copyright materials for that. But what I am saying is there's nothing in this presentation that is, to my knowledge, is owned by anyone else that you cannot use. So there again, we're talking about growing the church. How many souls at a time? One soul at a time. Now, you may think there again that I'm talking about, I'm limiting the broadness of evangelism. I'm not, okay? Now, when you sow seed and you scatter seed, depending on what kind of crop you're trying to get back, how many seed do you put out? All right. I got any corn farmers in here? I don't know if that's the right phrase or not. Anybody raise corn? Anybody grow corn? No? Anybody farm? No? Kinda, okay. How many corn kernels does it take to grow a corn stalk? Takes one, that's right. But if you plant 30, how many corn stalks you expect to get? That's right. Okay. But you're not going to get 50, are you? Unless you got some kind of weird fertilized mutant, something, some kind of nuclear, you're over around Knoxville, somewhere over in that area. But the thing is the only way we're going to grow the church is to grow it one soul at a time. And we need to focus on that, need to think about that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Let's look at some key words. Evangelism, the word evangelism in the, I think that's the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the winning or revival of personal commitments to Christ. Okay. That's okay, I guess, but I don't think that's the true definition, is it? Of course, the word, I don't want to bore you with some of that, but the word evangelism comes from evangelion in the Greek, and evangelion is the same word that is used for angel and messenger. Okay? So you need to think about that. You need to understand that when we are evangelizing, we are being what? Right, we're not being angels, although that same term applies. We're being God's messengers. Okay? That's what we are. And we're spreading the message of the gospel. And so, the town crier, yep, absolutely, same term, same word. Matthew 9:37-38, then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. So we're talking about corn a minute ago. Christy said reference flowers, but you don't harvest flowers. I guess you do some, but not this. Some of them, yeah. Okay. Do you harvest? You don't go out and cut them. Typically, you go to the flower shop and buy them. Okay, fair enough. I'm getting beat up here by the preacher's wives. Rebecca, where are you at? But all right, so think about it though. The harvest, okay? You're not going to let your crop sit there, are you? I've seen it, but I don't think it was 100% intentional. And so we need to realize that the crop is there. And we've got to be the ones, as Jesus said, that he needs those to go out and to labor. Romans 10:13-15. And some of the verbiage in here we understand, but some of it we struggle with. But the simplicity of what Paul said there is those who want to be saved, how are they going to be saved? They've got to hear it. They've got to hear the word. And there again, we go on to talk about how can they hear without a preacher, and how shall they preach unless they are sent? Now, don't get me wrong, we're not going to get into some of the fallacies of one person being called out among the others to do this, that, or the other, because every one of us is called, are we not? Everyone is called to spread the gospel. And we need to realize that. So we're going to talk about the biblical definition of evangelism. In Colossians 4, verses 2 and 3, continue earnestly in prayer, vigilant in it with thanksgiving, meanwhile praying also for us that God would open to us a door for the word, to speak the mystery of Christ. I am also in chains. And I think that is something that I'm glad we opened with a prayer, because if John had not called for it, I would have. Anytime you're going to do anything evangelistic, start with a prayer. Okay? Pray, pray, pray. It's like this. I was on Beverly and I were on a Zoom call with a fellow down in Huntsville that does some financial planning for members of the church, and he works with us on some of the things that we do at the Gospel of Christ. Dale Hubbard, I don't mind sharing his name. He is a financial planner, a brother in Christ. He preaches. If you need a financial planner, he'd be glad to talk to you. But we were talking, and he said, Joey, sometimes the thing you got to do is remember that Jesus said you receive not because what? You ask not, okay? And so before the end of the conversation, I said, hey, Dale, I don't have your name on our list. So I asked him, right? But I want you to realize something. We don't have because we don't ask. If you want this church to grow, if you want your home congregation to grow, what do you got to do? You got to ask, right? You got to remember, I want to be careful what I say here. But you've got to be able to realize that this church building is not what's most important to God. When we say we're going to church, we're not literally going to church because it's a building, are we? We are going because we are the church, right? That is the assembly of the saints. That is the assembling of ourselves together, Hebrews 10, 19 through 25. And so when we think about the idea and the opportunity to evangelize, we need to pray about it. We need to pray that God will fill up every seat here, not because we want to see the seats full, but because we know that every soul is important. What is a soul worth? What's a soul worth? Somebody answer.
More than the world.
Okay, why? Why do you say that?
What's showing the cross of man if he should gain the whole world?
Okay. Okay. I think of even. Okay.
Is from God.
Okay.
All this other is just physical and temporal.
Okay. I'm gonna tell you what my soul is worth. I'm gonna do it through Jesus' words. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. So my soul is worth so much that Jesus died for it, and so is yours, and so is every single person you see out there today. Okay? Think of them as souls, not people. Because when we get the right mentality, when we think about the souls, it changes the perspective. Our definition of evangelism is telling the good news to others. We've already looked at Matthew 28, 18 through 20. 2 Thessalonians 1, verse number 8. Anybody know that verse right off? I won't quote it word for word, but anybody know it? There will be vengeance upon those who, what? Do not obey the gospel. That has been a door opener for so many people I've ever talked to, because they read that, and I can remember very specifically a girl I had given Muscle and a Shovel to, and she called me and she said, "What does this mean?" And I'm like, "Let's talk." It's a door opener when you mention that verse, but it's that important. Proverbs 11, verse number 30, the back part of that says, "He who wins souls is wise." Okay, and so and that's Solomon, the wisest man ever written. Ever written about is writing that and speaking that. He who wins souls is wise. And so we need to understand what the importance of evangelism is. Who do we evangelize? Who should we evangelize? Neighbors? What do you think? Neighbors? Friends? Co-workers? New move-ins? What do you think? Those who are distraught. Now, I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. Life changes. New job, things like that. People in the pews. Ooh, hitting close to home now, aren't I? There are people in the pews who need evangelism. Those who are religiously confused. Now, you may think of 10 other people that need to be in that group. I try to collectively gather everybody I could think of, but those are the characteristics of people that we need to evangelize to, right? And so we need to think about that. Well, I want to hit on that last one just briefly. You can get these at home. Oh, well, I know my wife's taking notes. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but she is. All right, so let's talk about the religious confusion for just a minute. I want to kind of touch on that and then get away from it. These are some graphics that I have in some of my other presentations for the Gospel of Christ. So I felt like it was necessary to talk about these. If you look at the graph that's on the left, these are from the Pew Research Center or Pew Forum Research Center. U.S. Christians projected to fall below 50% of population if recent trends continue. That's scary to me. Okay, I want you to look at that in the 1970 era, 1972. You look at that. I think it says 90% of people said they were Christians. Now we know that based on Acts chapter 11, 19 through 26, not everybody that says is a Christian. Jesus said it himself in Matthew 7. Not everybody that says they're a Christian is a Christian. Okay, but in 1972, 90% of the United States said they were of Christian faith, and then in 2020, it's down to 64. Hmm, something happened there. A generation happened. I know that. But something else happened there because I want you to look at the downward trend there and see the projections of 2070. Now, most of us aren't going to be here at that point in time, if any of us are. Okay, I don't think. I have to do the math. I'd be 100. Okay, I don't know who the youngest person is here, but maybe you will be. I don't know. But 35% without limits. If there's no limits put on it with limits, you can see that. You can see the idea there of that. Um, what's neat is on the right hand side, you can't see what, John? Sorry. 64%. I can barely see it myself. 64%. And then the four, in hurricane sense, it's called spaghetti models. The four spaghetti models that are coming down from there, 54, 46, 39, and 35. And then there's some explanation there on that. There again, if you want these slides, I'll be glad to send them to you. Um, the one on the right, I get actually a little bit of a good feeling from it. Here's why. There again, I've been with the Gospel of Christ since 2017. I've been giving a presentation that still has, which I'm scheduled to be here the 15th, December 15th. So if you're here that day, you'll probably see the exact what I'm telling you right here. In 2015, the Pew Research Forum did a survey of people who were religious and where they fell in the categories. In that time, 2015, okay, let me echo that, and that's why I still use the graph. It was 16% of people said they were none of the above. That's across the world. 16% across the world are none of the above. I want you to look. This graph on the right is United States, God's country, as some people say, right? Okay. In 2007, it was 16%. Look at what it does. In 2000, and Phil Sanders is the first person I heard this particular statistic from, and I believe it was at the end of 2021 when you see that peak up there at 31%. 31% of the United States. Okay? The ones who think that we are the most religious in the world, right? 30%, 31% said they were of no opinion of religion. They're none of the above. That has changed in 2023 to 28%. So you don't say the curve can't make a difference, all right? Something's happening. I'm glad to see it. But we need to make sure that these folks that are religiously confused aren't in the wrong place at the wrong time, okay?
So did you see Greg Tidwell's article yesterday about Catholicism?
No. I saw it and read it. Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I need to go back and read that. I was working on my stuff yesterday. I was working on getting all this together. Most nuns believe in God or a higher power, but not in the biblical God. What? Okay, now what bothers me about that is if you could graph, I may have to blow it up on here to see it. Look at the bottom. Religiously affiliated people who never go to any kind of worship service. Can anybody see that number? 40% of religiously affiliated people do not attend regular worship services. Huh. I don't know. I mean, it's a survey. I don't know. Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, the graph below that said most nuns cite disbelief or skepticism as reasons they are not religious. I get that. Here's why I get that, because I've studied with young people. Some of you may know I used to, and John spoke on it once, I used to do a youth event every year. We did 8 or 9 events over the course of 7 years. And it's called TBH, which for us older people, that means to be honest. I don't even know that they use that anymore, but that was what our younger people would, it was a thing to, you'd say TBH to somebody and they had to tell you something that was truthful. Well, that was the whole purpose or idea of the youth event. And so as we did these, we would always tackle serious topics in this youth event. And we never really tackled this one, and I wish we had. But I have done a lot of studying on the fact of why are our younger generations not where they need to be. Now, I will tell you this, the youngest of the generation, well, I think they've named the new generation Gen A now, or next Gen A or something like that. But the Gen Z, I'm going to tell you something. They're religiously minded. You know, we've blamed everything in the world on Gen Y, which is millennials and Gen Z, but the Gen Z group, they're probably the one bringing that scale back up that we just looked at. Okay? Yeah. And so, but here's the problem. The youngest of our generations, some of them don't believe in the Bible because we're not teaching the Bible. Did you hear me? Okay. Those that answered this question, and I don't think it's in this graph, but I know it's in others that I've looked at, the number one reason or the number one indication that somebody is a nun in our younger generations is that they don't believe in the flood. They don't believe in a whole earth flood. Now you can go and listen to the Millers, and they'll tell you all about that. I think Jeff, Dave. Okay, I always get them confused on which one talks about what. But yes, they will tell you about the flood. They'll tell you how it can be proven. Yeah, he's got tons of books, and so Apologetics Press. But they can tell you about these things. But our younger generations do not believe in God because they don't believe in the flood. That's hard to fathom. Because when you drive around, I know some of you that follow me on Facebook, when I was up in Northeast Tennessee during the hurricane relief, I posted you gotta laugh sometimes. There was an ark in a playground that was flipped over on its side. I said, look, the ark came to rest, in the flood, right? So, I mean, you drive around and you see these ark that are all over the place, but yet now our children are saying they want to play in the ark, but they don't believe in the ark, right? Well, guess what? The reason they don't believe in the flood is because they don't believe in the 6 days of creation. Where does that start? Where's that at in your Bible? What chapter? In the beginning. If we can't teach 6 days of creation leading up to Genesis chapter 6 through 9, where we have the flood and the recreation, of mankind after Noah and his family were saved, we're not doing something right, church. And I'm not here to pounce on anybody about that. I'm just saying that's where we're missing it. It's not because we open our Bibles, and I didn't even get my Bible out, but y'all know I've got one. It's not because we open our Bibles to Matthew and they don't understand Matthew 28:18 through 20. It's not that they don't understand Mark 16:15, 16, or Acts chapter 8, here's water, what hinders me from being baptized. They don't understand it back here. Okay? Back to the basics. Okay?
The whole basis of what you're talking about with evangelism assumes that you have a respect for Scripture.
Yes, absolutely.
So that you can then build off of that respect for Scripture, establishing the authority of Jesus. If you don't
right.
If you don't have the respect of Scripture to start with, which starts with that understanding of the creation,
yep,
you don't have the foundation.
Yep. Some of us were joking in our breakfast this morning about AI. We were talking about AI, and this world of AI is scary. Okay, I'm not saying it's not helpful in some things, but it's scary. It's scary because now we're having to fight not only people teaching error, we also got to fight computers teaching error.
Well, and you don't know what's real and not real.
Right.
I mean, you don't know what is AI because it's not like it has AI written all over it. I mean.
So getting back to our graphs, the next one says most nuns describe their religion as nothing in particular. That is interesting because if you look, now those numbers look really inflated. Agnostic and atheist, that's 37% of people that say they're not religious. Now, overall, in that 2015 graph, I could tell you it was 7%. 7% of people that were surveyed in 2015 about their religious beliefs across the world were atheist and agnostic. So that number represents a lot bigger picture than what it really means. But I want you to understand something. When you're evangelizing, when you're talking to people and you're talking about God, not everybody that refuses to listen is an atheist or an agnostic. And let me also explain to you, there is a difference in those two. There's a huge difference in those two. An atheist is somebody who demands there is no God, period. You're going to have a really tough time convincing them that there is a God. An agnostic may have been sitting here Sunday morning. Okay? That's somebody who has the belief of, almost going back to one of those other graphs. Yeah, there's a higher power, but I just don't know it's that one. I think it may be this or this or this stone or this idol or whatever it may be. That's an agnostic, somebody who is of no opinion set in their mind. I used to say it was easier to study with an atheist than an agnostic, and then a couple of years ago I had an opportunity to study with both. It ain't easy either one, I'll just tell you. But 63% say that they're just nothing in particular. I'm religious, but I'm not religious and don't know why. All right, 43% of them, this is what's scary. 43% of those who say that they are none of the above say religion does more harm than good in American society. We have got to get that stigma gone. Okay? We've got to get that gone.
I think it's brought on by people that are hurt.
Yes.
And they want to blame
absolutely
the church for everything. It's not the church or not religion, but they blame
or blame God.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And so, put that in your bucket, like a better term, of things that we need to think about when we are working on evangelism. All right, so let's talk about, and you notice my disclaimer there because these sources. The Anglican Diocese of South Carolina said there's 6 styles of evangelism. There's direct, Acts 2:38. That's simple. Okay, we understand that. We're preaching, we're teaching, people respond. We get it. Okay. There's intellectual, Acts chapter 17. I want you to think about that just a minute. I love teaching on Acts chapter 17, and when I'm speaking somewhere and they want me to do a Bible study and they say, well, just whatever you want to do, that's where I go. You know why? Because those people were religious people, but they were so religiously confused they didn't know what to think. And what did they do? They worshipped everything and everything and everything else, and then they made something else in case they missed something, right? The unknown God. Okay, but as you look through that at the I never can say it right, Areopagus, and there you go. What John said. When you look at that and you look at this lesson, that Paul is teaching there, where does he start with those people? Doesn't he go to their own poets? Doesn't he go to their own teachers?
He goes where they are.
Yes, and he takes it in an intellectual move and he moves it to show them where they need to be. Sometimes we fail at that. Sometimes and social media is one of the worst avenues for this. Now, social media is good in its sense that you can use it for good. But what happens a lot of times is one person says, well, I don't think you have to be baptized to be saved. And then you get somebody jumps in there, well, yeah, you do. Well, I don't think you do because of this verse. Well, no, you do. And the next thing you know, you got this big long brawl going, okay? Well, the question would be, well, why do you not think that you need to be baptized when this verse says this? Instead of just jumping and saying you're wrong, okay? You take them where they're at. You got to figure out where they're at first and move them forward. That's what Paul did. That's exactly what he did. And what does it say? In Acts chapter 17, around verse 30, 31, at one point God winked at this ignorance, but now commands all men to repent. And in verse 31, I believe it says that some of them went with him, right? Some of them were convinced, okay? And so we need to understand we got to start where they're at sometimes. Testimonial, and I know that word has been abused in religious worlds, but it's truth, okay? We need to talk about it sometimes. What I mean by testimonial, well, John chapter 9 is talking about the healings, the things that people's lives that changed for Jesus, okay? And so those are testimonies, right? Are they not? Now, we cannot testify to the fact that Jesus walked the earth in a physical sense because we weren't there. And that's what the testifying of the Bible talks about and the witnessing of the Bible, but we can give testimony to why we changed our lives, can we not? Okay? We need to be careful with saying we can't. Relational, Luke 5:27-29 gives some indication there. What was Jesus doing? There again, he wasn't going to the bars, but he was eating with the sinners. He was eating with the drunkards. He was eating with those. He made it relationship based. Okay? Invitational. That's easy. That's easy, isn't it? Inviting others to come and see. Don't say come to church. Okay? Come and see. Come and see. Well, if you're going to tell them to come and see, they got to have something to see, right? And they've got to have something that is interesting to them. We'll talk about that in the next segment. All right, service, compassion. If you have compassion on people, that is a form of evangelism that people will not forget. Okay? Uh, Jesus, I think it's Acts chapter 4, it said Jesus went about doing good. And people listened. People heard. As they heard, they listened, they were taught, they obeyed. And we need to understand that there is opportunity through service. And there again, that's where our youngest generation is shining right now. The youngest adult generation is shining right now. They want to serve. Find your younger people. If you have younger people in your congregations, find them and ask them how they want to serve. Okay? They will figure it out. They will figure it out. A lot of them are probably doing a whole lot more than many of us that have been Christians for 40, 50 plus years. Okay? They're doing more. They just may not be doing it right. Okay? And so we need to work on that. All right, there's 3 modes of evangelism. OU, Ben Seller, natural evangelism. That's what we're doing right here. That's the preaching of the gospel. Body and life, that's the living, the service. And then ministry. When we serve, what does ministry mean? What's the word minister mean? Servant. Yeah. Diakonos is the diakonos is the Greek word for that. Same term that's I won't get into the textual variants of Acts chapter 6, but it's the same term that the word deacon comes from. But also Jesus is called a diakonos. So I mean, I can't call Jesus a deacon. So I've got to take the context of the verb and figure out where it goes. It's a minister. It's a servant. It's a servant. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the ABCs of evangelism. All right. There's actually more than A, B, and C. But attitude. First thing we got to think about is our attitude. Ephesians 2 and verse number 10. For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. You ever get somebody talking about Ephesians 2, 8, 9? That's how you're saved. Okay. That's fine. But I want you to see why we're saved. Ephesians 2:10. Okay? Because we're saved for good works for Him. It's a 3-legged chair. I think John preached on something like that. John Maxwell, I know he's a secular guy, but people may hear your words, but they feel your attitude. And I promise you, that is the truth right there. Here's the mentality of evangelism. Most of my crowd in here will know where that picture's from. Anybody want to say? Field of dreams. Build it and they will come, right? Here's the reality of evangelism. We build the building and we expect them to come, right? Maybe they'll come. I'm not trying to beat anybody up, but that's our mentality. And sometimes we get stuck in that mentality, and we've got to get past that and beyond that. What's that?
Church sign evangelism.
Yeah, church sign evangelism. Here's the thing. You can put as many signs up as you want. I guarantee you those signs are not going to get anybody go, oh, look, there's a Church of Christ. Maybe we should go and try that. It ain't going to happen. Those signs are there to tell people who are looking for you where you're at, okay? Now, in the 50s when the church was growing by leaps and bounds, and people wanted to know, wonder what's going on over there. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. Wonder what's going on over there at that church. That's when the sign was very, very, very important. It's still important because it knows what people are expected to identify with. But yeah, can't believe them sometimes.
A lot of buildings have that sign on it, but
yep.
That's not what's inside it.
All right, so what is bad attitude toward evangelism? Now, I may step on toes, and I'm sorry if I do, but no, I'm not, okay? Excuses. and paradigm, okay? Paradigm means a change of mind. It's kind of like repentance, all right? We tried that, and I've been in many church settings. Brian and I served, Brian Whitty, I'm putting him on the spot here. Brian, do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert? He is an introvert. I'm calling it. Brian and I served as deacons together at a congregation, and I just preached there recently, and I said in the pulpit that I'm sorry for some of those decisions I made years ago. You know, I mean, as deacons, that's the way we served. And I don't know if you feel that way or not, but I mean, there's some things that we did that just, you know, I look back and go, why did we do that? You know, we just didn't know, you know. But we tried that. Well, here's the paradigm of that. How can we do it better this time? Okay. If you fail at something, you know, the old adage is you try again until you get it right, right? Well, okay, well, sometimes at the church, we try something, and then we put it over on the shelf. We won't do it again. And unfortunately, that's what happens with a lot of good evangelistic work. I don't know enough, okay? You may be sitting here today, you may say, I can't teach the plan of salvation. You know what? Here's what I'm going to say. When you think about the idea of 1 Peter 3 and verse number 15, that we must be able and willing to give a reason for our hope of salvation, you do know enough, okay? If you're a Christian, you know exactly what it takes to become a Christian. Now, do you know all there is to know about the whole entire scheme of redemption, the plan of salvation, all the way from Genesis 1 to Revelation 22:21? Probably not. I don't either, okay? I don't understand some of it sometimes, but I have to dig deeper and figure it out. But do I need to know Revelation 19 verse 20, or if there is a verse 20, do I need to know exactly what it says and what the exegete is for it to become a Christian? Probably not, okay? Remember, Jesus said, teach them to observe all things which I've commanded. There comes a time for that. I don't know enough. Well, here's the thing. Write it down and follow it up. That's what you got to do. You know, if you ask me a question today and I don't have a reasonable answer, or if you challenge me on that answer, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to follow up with you. I'm going to figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, I'll go to some other wise counsel, much wiser than I am, which isn't much, but I'm going to find somebody that knows that answer, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about it. There are times, and don't get me wrong, please don't get me wrong. There are times when I'll ask a question to those that I love dearly that have preached for many, many, many years. I do this to Ben sometimes just to see if I can. Ben has a degree in Greek, okay? And I'll ask him something about a Greek statement, and I'll say, what does this mean and why? And he'll say, I have to get back to you on that. Well, about a week later, I have to ask him again, you know? And sometimes he'll just say, I don't know. I need to study it, okay? And so there are times when somebody just don't have the answer right away. And so we need to realize that. Write it down, follow up. Introvert and extrovert, we just talked about that. I'm going to ask the question. I want you to raise your hand if you feel comfortable doing so. Or if you're an introvert, please raise your hand. Mac, you have the highest introverted raised hand I've ever seen in my entire life. Most of y'all are like this right here, okay? But you went like this. So how many of you are extroverts? Yeah. See the hands, see how high they are? Okay. Yeah, exactly. We're gonna talk about that a little bit in our practical application, but pair up for compliment, okay? Pair up. There is some sense to that. You know, if Brian truly is an introvert, and he's not, he ain't listening to me no more. He's mad at me because I called him an introvert. But let me give the definition. Some of y'all don't know what I'm talking about. An introvert is somebody who don't want to be seen, don't want to talk to, they just want to be there. Okay, now they carry on conversations and things like that, but they're not one that's going to jump out. Okay, an extrovert, you ain't gonna get the hush. All right, so that's. Yeah, she ain't an introvert. So that's the difference between the two. But here's the thing. Some of our most introverted people are the wisest in the Bible that we've ever met. And some of the extroverts don't know what they're talking about. Okay? And so
the introvert doesn't talk, they're just not going to go up to a stranger and instigate a conversation or
and there's nothing wrong with that. Whatever classification you're in there, that's okay. You can still be saved. All right? And you can still evangelize. And you can still be an active person in the community. You can do all these things. There's nothing wrong with that. My wife will tell you I am an extrovert. What do I mean by that? Look at people's vacation pictures. You may see me in them, even though I don't know them. I'll stand behind somebody. I mean, it's nothing for me. If somebody's taking a picture at Dollywood, I'll stand right there with them and wave. And then they go, "Who's that guy?" And they'll see me walking away. So, yeah, well, there you go. So, oh yeah, I always do a selfie. If somebody, will you take my picture? Sure, and I do a selfie on their phone. So yeah, I'm that guy. Anyway, I have fun, right? If you can't have fun as a Christian, you ain't doing something right. I'll just say it. All right. All right. So pair up for compliment. All right. It costs too much. That is the biggest thing I ever hear about. John, calm down now. That's the biggest thing I ever hear is it costs this much. We can't do this. It costs this much. Whew. Oh boy. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse number 8. Look that verse up. Look up that whole passage. I preached on that Sunday a little bit. Look up that whole passage. God will supply the needs. Okay? If you're doing the work for God, if you're doing what work He wants you to do, if you've asked and you seeked and you're knocking, He's going to provide the means. Okay? Amen. There's nothing short in God's world. Nothing short. I've heard countless stories. I heard a story some years ago, probably one of the first polishing pulpits I ever went to, probably 2012. I heard a story about a church in North Alabama that they were doing like a bus ministry in the community. The bus broke down. They were a small congregation, like 60, 50, 40 people. Smaller. I call that a pretty good sized congregation, but they were a smaller congregation. They couldn't afford to buy a new bus. The bus, I think the cost was, at that time was like $25,000. Well, they didn't have elders. The preacher, he got up and he explained the situation that Sunday and said, listen, our bus ministry is gone. And they could see that because they were short people, okay? And he said, we got to have $25,000 to buy a new bus. So I've asked some of the other men, I've asked if I could mention that and if we could take up a special collection for that need. They did that day. That day, unannounced, okay? If I understood the story correctly, and if I remember correctly, you know how much was in their contribution that day? Anybody want to guess? $40,000. They bought the bus, right? Well, about a year or so later, they had something else come up. They were able to grow a little bit, but they were also able to get involved in several mission works. And one of the missionaries from overseas came and said, "Hey, we want to build a preaching school over here. It's going to cost $60,000." Well, while he was there, the men, they still didn't have elders at that point in time, but whoever it was that was telling the story, he said they talked about it. That next Sunday, they said, we're going to have a special contribution. Guess what they did? They built a building. Matter of fact, they built two. Okay? God will supply. Now, I'm not teaching a prosperity gospel, all right? I'm not doing that. But if you're doing the work for God, I want you to think about, if you think about the clothing you've got on today, sometimes our clothing costs more than we've even decided to contribute to the work of God. Okay? So we need to be careful there that we don't limit God. It's somebody else's job. It's the preacher's job. It's the elder's job. It's the preacher's wife's job. It's that's just somebody else's job. Well, no, it's everybody's command. We've already seen that. Jesus commanded all to go. Okay? We can't reach this world. That's right. I'll agree with that. You know why I'll agree with that? Because Jesus couldn't. Think about it. Now, I'm not limiting Jesus. I'm just saying Jesus couldn't. There were those at the end of John chapter 6. I think one of the saddest verses in the entire Bible is verse number 66. And many of his disciples turned and walked with him no more. Okay? There is this understanding that not everybody's going to be saved. We get it. But don't let it be because of us. Just one more. We've been talking about just one. I'll tell you quick. I've got to keep this one quick. In 2001, I left the company I was working for. It was a very large security company in several states, and I left that company for various reasons. But a company in Texas hired me as a consultant to come and to help them because they'd been open about a year. And they weren't being very successful. So I flew to Dallas and stayed there for 8 weeks. I was there during September 11th, which was very scary. But I was there for about 8 weeks. And the first week I got there in August 10th, When I got there, I walked into the office and I said, okay. And of course, you got to be around the sales world to know what I'm talking about. Some of this, I'll try to explain it on layman's terms, if not. But we had a sales board that showed all the people's names that sold for the company and their daily results. Well, I saw a bunch of names and I saw no results. And I'm like, okay, this is the like the 11th or the 12th of the month. Why is there no numbers on this board? Well, that's just, that's what we're struggling with. I'm like, okay, so it's 2 weeks in the month and you've had 0 sales for the month. Well, no, we had 1. It just didn't written up there. Okay, well, I knew what the proceeds came from that contract of selling that security system, and it wouldn't even feed one person, okay, for a week, much less a whole employee count for the company. And I'm like, well, you got to do something. How are you paying me, by the way? How are you paying me? Well, I've been saving up money for this. I'm okay. Well, all right, let's do this. I said, what time do the salespeople be here for the meeting? Oh, we just have them about once every other week. And I'm like, what? I said, no, you call all your salespeople, and I want them here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And if they're not here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, their name's coming off that board. If they're going to work, they're going to work. If they're not, they're not. Okay? Now, you take that for what it's worth. That meeting that morning, I said, all right, guys, here's the deal. I introduced myself. I told them, I said, look, I've worked for a very successful company. We sell 1,200 systems a month. I manage 2 of those offices, one in Birmingham, one in Evansville, Indiana. And my Birmingham office sometimes would be the most productive office. It wasn't most profitable office, I should say. It wasn't the most productive because Nashville was usually number 1. But here's the thing. Here's how we did it. And I gave them a formula. And I said, this is how I teach every salesperson I ever train. And I gave them that formula. They had to go and knock on so many doors, okay? They had to put out so many flyers, brochures, and they had to spend 1 hour on the phone talking to relationships that they had built or their referrals. And I challenged every one of them. I said, if you'll do these things, you will not end the day without a sale. If you do all 3 of these things. Here's the thing. Time-wise, you couldn't do all 3 of those things. Why? Because if you're knocking on 20 doors, my usual norm would be if I would knock on 20 doors, 10 of those people would answer the door, 2 of those people would let me in the house, and 1 of those persons was my sale for the day. Okay? Now that takes time. But my day wasn't done. I'd hand out my 250 flyers. Now, used to, you wouldn't get in so much trouble of putting them on cars or mailboxes or whatever. Now you can't do that as much. But I also didn't do that. I was very targeted in my approach of that. So I probably would only put out 40 to 50 flyers a day, but it took time because of the style I was doing it. And I would always spend 1 to 2 hours on the phone at the end of the day, calling my referrals, calling the people that I had sold to, making sure everything went the way it went. Okay, now I tell you that to say that we came up with a slogan. Guess what it was? Just one more. We had Nextel phones. Anybody remember those? Those are really cool. And you talk to somebody right there, walkie-talkie. And so we all had those. And so I told them, I said, all right, guys, let's go out, let's work, let's get the sales on the board, yee-haw-ray, and they're all like, okay. Yeah. I'm like, here's the deal. First person gets a sale, I want you to click your Nextel phone. You say, just one. And I said, the next person gets the next sale, I want you to say, just one more. Well, about an hour and a half, 2 hours went by. Hadn't heard any clicks on the phone. Well, I got the first click. I got my sale. I did what I was teaching them to do, and I actually had a guy with me, and he's like, that's easy. I'm like, no, it's work. It's not easy. It's just you've got to follow the patterns. So I got on the phone. I said, just one. Dead silence. And I'm like, okay, somebody's supposed to say just one more, And so, and the owner said, click, click. Are you serious? Oh, no, that's not what you're supposed to say. Yes. Yes. So about an hour later, I had somebody key up and go, just one more? And I'm like, I called him. Did you get one? Yeah. I said, well, say it again. One more. I said, okay, good. Well, you know what that happens after that? You know what happens after that? You go back and do what? You start over. Just one. And do just one more. By the end of that week, and that was on Tuesday, by Friday, we had 14 sales on the board. Okay? 14 sales. That's still not a lot. But from 10 days of 1 to 14 at the end of 3 days, That made a difference. Okay. Now, I'm not saying I was magical in that. I'm just saying I applied the things, and that's what we're doing today, right? We're talking about things that we know work, and so we got to do those things. We got to have balance in evangelism. And what I mean by that is we got to balance the elders. Pay attention to me. I love mission works. Okay. I am a mission work, but we need to make sure we balance those things. We got to make sure that we're not hesitate to tell this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I spoke to a preacher some time ago, a few years back. We were trying to launch in a market out west. And I talked to him. I said, hey, is there any chance the congregation there can help? It's only $50 a week. I mean, that's a good, really good price for a broadcast. And his answer was, man, we're about to shut our doors. And I said, I hate to hear that. They've not to this day, because I know the preacher. And I said, I'm really sorry to hear that. And I said, what are you doing? Is there anything maybe I can help you with? And he's like, well, no, everything's good. I said, well, I said, there's a couple things you can do. And I, shared a few ideas with him. He said, well, that'd be fine. He said, but we just can't seem to pay our bills. He said, all of our focus goes to XYZ missions overseas. And I'm like, brother, hold on a minute. You're telling me that you're about to close your doors, but all of your finances are going overseas. I have a problem with that. And I think our Lord probably does too. We cannot. I get it. I love seeing the stories of Guyana. I love seeing the story, especially India. I mean, you hear back from India mission work, and there's 3,000 people baptized in a week. That's great. But friends, we can't get to a point where we're in the situation of India sending missionaries to the United States. And I'm going to tell you, based on those numbers we looked at a minute ago, it ain't as far around the corner as you think. Okay? We got to be very careful. Yeah, absolutely. West Virginia is a mission field. John and I, Brian, we've all worked in that area. It's a mission field. Where Christy and I are moving in the panhandle of Florida, guess what? It's 40 miles from one congregation to the next. It's real, friends. Domestic mission work is real. But what I want to focus on local efforts too, though. Let's not send thousands of dollars to wherever and then forget about the little neighborhood over here that we could spend $20 to print some flyers or whatever. Okay? Let's not forget that. Edification of the saints versus new visitors. We're going to talk a lot about visitors in a little bit. Programs versus busy work. Everybody's probably seen that. You create a program, but it ends up being busy work. Benevolence versus compassion. You'll see down at the bottom, that's a phrase that I coined. Benevolence without evangelism is just busy work, period. You can do all the benevolence you want, but if you're not evangelizing with that benevolence, you've lost it. Okay? All you're doing is giving out handouts. That's it. Okay? Sowing seed versus teach and reach. Maybe you understand that. You can scatter seed all day long. Some of it's going to take root, right? We can go through the parable if you want, but some of it's going to take root. Not all of it. Not a lot of it. But teach and reach. Okay? Getting back to that focus. Milk versus meat. It was said a minute ago, first principles. Okay? Sometimes we need milk. Sometimes we need meat. That is a challenge in the area, and I don't think the folks down there would disagree with me. That is a challenge in the area that Christy and I are planning to move to in Florida, is that they are a tourist church. And nearly every sermon that is preached there, because they have a lot of rotating preachers. I preach there sometimes. Cliff Goodwin preaches there. I mean, they have a lot of people that come and preach there, and unfortunately, a lot of times lessons are more milk than they are meat. Here's the thing. I don't know hardly any of you guys. I don't know what you need. So if I were preaching here today, which I kind of am, but if I were preaching here today, I'd probably go to a neutral milk type lesson because I don't know if you're a member of the church or not. Sometimes we got to realize that there are those in the pews that need much deeper than that. Resources. I would say that our most wasted resource is what? Building, okay? Y'all have a fabulous building here. I've got lost coming back from the donuts this morning. I figured I better stay over here. So, I don't want to get lost, but y'all have a fabulous building. Use it if you can. We'll talk about how you can do that, okay? Using your resources versus tools. Notoriety versus exaltation. Are you doing these things because you want to be known? Are you doing these because you want to exalt the Lord? And so we need to realize that. Compassion. Compassion means to be moved in one's bowels, the intense inner feeling in the heart. When the multitudes, when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them because they were weary and scattered, like sheep having no shepherd. There's some other verses there. I'm going to skip through those for time's sake. John, it is 11. It might be 11:45 if I okay. Okay, good deal. Um, but you see what Jesus said: "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another." All right, skip through that. I'm gonna let this come up on the screen here. This lady, this came from a Facebook post, but it was from a Facebook post. This lady said, "We've gone to this church about 8 times. I wish I could make this go faster. It's like we're ghosts. I started going to the women's Bible study. I can't imagine sitting with a new person and sharing like you do in a Bible study and not trying to connect. Every single week after the study, ladies figure out where to go to lunch, and I'm right there, and not one person invites me to join them. Friends, let me tell you something. That happens more than you think. Okay? The retreat was yesterday. A lady asked if I was going. I explained that we have one car and that Gary needed it for work. Talk about a perfect opportunity to offer to give me a ride. Nope. She walked away. Now, do you imagine that person stayed? I mean, I don't know who she was, don't know anything about her, but I doubt she stayed there. Okay? Make it count. Compassion is the key to helping souls see the love of Christ and knowing and growing the kingdom. Dedication. Irma Bombeck said, when I stand before God at the end of the day, I would hope that I would not have a single bit of talent left and I could say I used everything you gave me. We got to be consistent. We've got to have commitment. We've got to have patience. We've got to have resilience. Those 4 things are required for evangelism. Okay? It takes time sometimes to do these things. It takes time to reach souls. Jesus said to them again, "Peace to you, as the Father has sent me, I also send to you." We got to be dedicated to it. There's a little slide here. I won't go through all these. I know y'all are you mailing house to house right now or no? Okay, but you are if you're not familiar with house to house, Brian, y'all mail house to house, don't you? Okay. Yeah, you can hand some of these out. That'd be great. Matt Wallen is a good friend of mine. Matt can give you more information on house to house if you choose. Let me tell you something. Direct mail works. It's a slow process though. You don't do house to house in New Union? Okay, figured you did. I thought I remembered you did. It is a slow process, but it does work. And so keep that in mind, that these things sometimes take effort. But these numbers that Matt gave me show that people read mailers. All right, and so efforts. We're going to talk about some, and this is where I'm going to get to show some examples, and then we'll get to the next segment, and that'll go rather quickly. Okay, so here's some things. I'm just going to put them all on the screen, then we'll talk about them. I believe you're right, John. I believe that wire's short now, but I'm going to try to keep still. Okay, so I've got a lot of things on the screen. I invite you to take a picture of those, or like I said, I can send it to you, either one. But I want to talk about some of these things in detail. First thing, and I want to get on a tangent here. We're going to talk about this in the application section, the practical session too. Do you have door greeters here? Used to? Okay. Do you have door greeters at New Union, Paul? And I'm picking on people I know. Do you have door greeters at Midway? Yeah, y'all do. Everybody greets at Midway, right? Everybody stands there. Okay. That's fine. That's a good opportunity. But let me change your mindset. Remember, we got paradigm. Let me change your mindset a little bit. I have been through several case studies, not just in this world, but there again, I worked around sales for 25 plus years. My parents had businesses that involved sales for a long time before I was born. The nature of people is not to come into a building and be thwarted with all kinds of people. Okay? With that said, there is an extreme on the other side, but I want to talk about this. Again, we're going to break this down a little bit. A visitor's first thing they do when they walk in the door, and this may not be every single person, but the majority of people, when they walk in a door, they know hardly nobody. Okay? They want to go sit down. They don't want to be noticed. They don't want to be exalted among anybody else. Okay? I'm just giving you the hard facts. Okay? I know that's unnatural to us. We want to speak to them. We want to stop them at the door and grab them and say, "Hey, we're glad you're here. Glad you're visiting." Well, what you've done is you've kind of announced to everybody around them that they're strange to you. Okay, they're a stranger in your midst. They want to sit down. Now, is that wrong? No. Is it right? No. You'll have the extroverts who may go sit down and then get back up. Okay, but here's the thing, and we'll use some examples of this during the next. I gotta hold some of this till later. But here's the thing: if you've got a door greeter and their job is to greet visitors when they come in the door, sometimes what's going to happen is the member that's coming in the door right before that visitor is going to stop and talk to the door greeter. They're going to talk about something that happened yesterday, and oh yeah, by the way, the ball game this afternoon, this, that, and the other, and this visitor's having to like squeeze by to go find that seat that they're wanting to get sit down in, right? And then, oh no, they sat down in Sister Martha's seat. Oh boy. Miss Sister Martha ain't going to be happy about that. And I hear some laughing. I'm sorry if your name's Martha, sorry. But, they're going to sit in Sister Martha's seat, and Martha ain't going to be happy about it. Oh, no. I want to tell you, it can go from that extreme to the other, though. I visited out west a few years ago. I had two congregations to go to, and I had some downtime in the afternoon by myself, so I just slipped into another congregation that had supported us in the past, slipped into their afternoon service. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. Well, I got there a little bit early, 15 minutes. I was the first person there besides the preacher. So I had to wait for the door to be open. That's okay. So I went in. This building is like probably, the auditorium is probably 3 to 4 times the size of this one, okay? I sat down. There's only one main set of doors, kind of like what y'all got. There's some side doors, but there's one main set of doors. I sat down at the third pew from the back on the end. I'm in a coat and tie. Over the course of the next 15 minutes, over 1,000 people walked through those doors. At the end of that worship session, which really was kind of strange anyway, because most of them were in shorts and t-shirts. They were having a cookout after the service at a park down the road. They announced, oh yeah, at 5:45 we're going to break, and we're all going to the park down the road, or we're going to so-and-so park. Well, I didn't know what they were breaking for, didn't know where the park was, didn't know anything about it. When the last amen was said, you know what I did? I stood up and I walked toward the door. I didn't speak to anybody, because guess who had spoken to me? Not a soul. Not a soul. I felt so uncomfortable at that congregation. Finally, somebody grabbed me and said, "Hey, are you visiting?" No. That is also something to keep in mind. A visitor does not know who's visiting. All right? So when you have that situation I expressed just a minute ago, they may think that you're leaving them out because you're actually talking to a visitor that you may know. But what happens is when I walk into a church building and I see people, I don't have a clue if they're a member or a visitor, because I'm a visitor. And so if I'm being ignored, like in that case, my feelings are hurt. Okay? So that's what I'm saying. It can go from one to the other. Here's what I will suggest to you. Have pew greeters. I know that's awkward, but I want you to have some people in your congregation that are trained to look for visitors in the pews. They don't have to be assigned on a bulletin to be a pew greeter. They could just be somebody who is an extrovert, most likely. They don't have to be, but they most likely will be, that is armed, so to speak, with things that we're talking about here. And what am I talking about? Folders, brochures, bags. Okay. This is a sample folder. I've got a handful of these up here. Y'all are welcome to. You can order these online. There is, I think it's called Growth International, something like that, that will sell you a whole customized packet of these. I think I sent that to you, didn't I? Growth Partners International or something like that?
Yes.
Okay, a link. Okay. So anyway, so this is a welcome folder. I used to make these up where I preached at. What would go in them? Well, several things. And we'll talk about that during the application lesson, the practical application, but I would put a card, business card, a visitor card, okay? Because, yeah, they're in the back of the pew, and you announce it every single time the announcements are made, that please fill out a visitor card, leave it in the pew, leave it, whatever.
How many times have we heard that?
there's not a card there or a pencil's broke or whatever. So if you got a pen here, you got a card here, you got a business card here, there's some brochures and all these are up here. We'll hand them out during the practical application. This is a sample of one I made that tells where the bathrooms are. You think about that. A visitor don't know where the bathrooms are, right? I found another one down the hall earlier, and I'm like, hey, that's cool. There's another one here. So, yeah, the two upstairs too. See, I mean, yeah, I don't know where they're at. Okay, things like that. Tic Tacs. I got a little. Yeah, I was chewing on some earlier. Put them in there. They're going to want them, right? There's other things you can put in here. I've got all kinds of samples up here of those type of things. You can do the same thing with a bag. That being said, folders are gold. If you're an elder, you're a preacher, you're a deacon. If y'all go to that practice of having those folders, you need to have some in your pew. Because also, not only is a visitor not wanting to be recognized, a visitor usually comes in at what time? I had a girl tell me that one time. She snuck in right when the service started, and as soon as the service was over, she was gone. I chased her. I went out the building looking for her, trying to find her. I wanted to meet her, okay? And she told me that. She said, I was trying to get in and out without anybody seeing me. She just wanted to worship, okay? That's it. Mike, what are you whispering over there?
So you probably know this lady, the young lady that works in the lab at Dr. Crusler's.
Okay.
Got the bob haircut.
Okay.
Service.
Yeah.
And I told her, come down and sit with us.
Yep.
I want you to sit with us. And she said, no.
No, she don't want to sit with you. That's right. Yep.
Back to you.
That's another thing. And you'll hear different people talk about this, but I also, I try to read people as much as I can. I'm a people person. I watch people. Sorry if that creeps you out, but I mean, I like to watch people. I enjoy watching people's interactions and things. Yeah, we do it together. Yeah, we got Dollywood season passes, and we don't ride rides. We just go and sit and watch people. It's fun. It's fun. We take the grandkids, but I almost lost my train of thought. Hang on, let me gather that for just a second. Yeah, visitor on the back seat. Some people will say, oh, come sit with me. They don't want to sit with you. So what you say is, when you find a seat, if you don't mind, I'm going to come sit behind you. Okay? And then that way, if Sister Martha comes in and she goes, oh, somebody's in my seat, you can go, hey, Martha, can I talk to you a minute? So you sit with them, but you don't sit with them. And you certainly don't call on their name during the announcements or the worship service and ask them to stand or raise their hand. Okay? I just don't find that very appealing at all. You may disagree with me on that. That's not we aren't going to argue that at the end of the day. But people just don't like it. They don't like it. And so we need to make sure that we understand that. So those folders, if you do those folders, and you've got pew greeters, not just door greeters, but you got pew greeters, guess what's happening now? You've got that folder and say, hey, you can calmly and casually say, hey, I see you're visiting here today, right? Because there again, you don't want to do that if somebody has been a member there and they've been there for years and you just don't realize that they ain't been there. You're right. You don't want to do that. I did that when I first started preaching at Elkins. I went to a member's house because I hadn't seen her there, based on the picture that was in the directory, and I knocked on her door and I went, she said, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I was visiting everybody I hadn't seen. I said, I didn't think I've got a picture out there, and I'm going, this ain't you. This ain't your picture. But, so anyway, so you don't want to offend them by that, but you can say, hey, do you mind if I write, you know what, we usually do a visitor card. Do you mind if I go ahead and just write down your name for you? I'm not going to say, here, fill this out. I'm going to write it down. Why am I going to write it down? Why am I going to write it down?
So you can reach out later.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you have, some people call them visitation teams. I don't know why we call them that because you don't really go visit. But I don't know if you have, evangelism teams, whatever the case may be. But if I'm writing that person's name down, number one, I know I can read it, even though somebody else may not be able to. But I know their name, and they've given me their name, and I've repeated their name. Okay, you said that was John Summers. Okay. Hey, John, where do you live at? A lot of the folks in the church, they like to send cards out to people who come by and worship with us. Remember, catch what I said. I didn't say visit with us. I said they worship with us. The more you use the word visitor, the more estranged they may become. They're your guest. They're your friend. They're there to worship with you.
I want to raise a point
Yes, sir.
for our folks.
Yep.
We have been making an effort to have folks leave those back pews open,
Yeah, that's good.
and we've had varying degrees of success. But the reason that we're making that effort is because we are planning for visitors, not hoping for, planning for visitors.
Yep.
And so we want to make sure that they have a place where they can slide in and feel comfortable.
I'm going to have to stair step off of visitors. We're going to come back to it in a practical. But cards and calls, that's the second line there. John graciously got a bunch of colored cards here. We'll use some of those during the practical. I got some that just say thinking of you. What these are for are not for members of the church. They're not for your members here. You can send them to your members if you choose, but that's not what the idea behind them is. The idea behind them is how many of y'all, and I know I do, and I know I'm not the only one that does. How many of y'all get obituaries in your email? Oh, come on. You don't want to see who died? You know, okay, you get them on Facebook. Okay. But here's the thing. Sometimes you pull one up, we lived in Morrison for 4 years. We don't know everybody in Morrison, but when I see one from Morrison, I look to see who they are. I look to see if they were people that I might have met, that I may have known, a family member of somebody I knew. And you know what happens? If I see them, a lot of times I'll ask Christy. I'm not the best at handwriting. Yeah, can you send so-and-so a card? Here's their address. And it's just a thinking of you. Remember I said life changes in their lives? That's who we evangelize to. Can you imagine if somebody got 10 or 15 cards when a loved one passed away from somebody they don't know? And by the way, during our practical, we're going to say, you don't fill this out from the Grundy Street Church of Christ or whatever the congregation name. You don't do that. You fill them out from who? You. Yeah. Because you're going to send them another card in a few weeks. Not the same card, get a different card, but I will caution you to not get religiously overt cards. Some people are so mad at God right now because they've lost their job or their loved one or whatever it may be. They don't want to read a Bible verse about seek ye first the kingdom of God. Okay? They don't want to read it. I don't mean that they won't in a few weeks, but they don't want to read it first off. Okay? Index cards, we'll talk about how to use those in a few moments. New movers, same scenario. You can get new mover lists. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they're not. But if you can do like a radius of the church building or even around your own houses, things like that. Get those new mover lists. You put them on. You can use index cards. That's the way I used to do. We'd take a sticky label and put their address on an index card, and I'd hang it up on the church bulletin board. And it was a responsibility of members to go by and check that bulletin board, grab it, look to see on the back how kind of communication had been done with that new mover for a few weeks, or take them a bag if nobody has. If it's not written down, somebody's taking them a bag, you take that card, you pick up a bag, you carry it to their house Sunday afternoon after worship services. You knock on the door. If they're there, great. If they're not, you leave that bag. That bag's full of goodies like DVDs, things like that. Just stuff from the church. Okay, welcoming them to the community. Plainview, where Ben preaches, they do it's neat. They do like a roll of paper towels, a pack of dish detergent. I mean, they do some serious new mover bags. All right, you don't have to. I mean, the ones I did cost like $3. Okay, I went to the dollar store, Family Dollar, and I got the little cheap printed bags, the colored bags, and we just stuff stuff in them. Bulletins, things like that. House to house, we talked about. Utilize house to house. We'll talk about that in the application station. Leave behinds, cards, tokens. I've got some of our free Bible study cards up here. You're welcome. I've got a box of 1,000 up here. I'll bring some more later. Branding. I'm not as big a fan of branding as I am at like door knocking and stuff like that as I am about events. So if you're having something with your church event, have branded materials. Those pens that you've got have the church's name on them. People keep stuff like that. They really do. John's got a Gospel of Christ shirt, right? Whew, boy, I made that mistake. I shouldn't say a mistake, but we ordered from a different vendor about 2 months ago, and I put a picture of them on Facebook, and whew, boy, the requests I got from all over the country. Can I have one of those? And so, yeah. So people like branding, but the neat thing is, and the same thing with TBH, when we were doing TBH, we always had shirts. And I've seen those shirts all over the country in people's pictures. Abigail sent us a text one day from Freed Hardeman Horizons and said, There's some dude here with a TBH shirt on. I don't have a clue who it is. She sent me a picture. I didn't know who it was either. I guess he went to Goodwill. I don't know. But he had on a TBH shirt. Okay. Involvement in the community. There are more ways to be involved in the community than you can ever imagine. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to ask this question. Do y'all still vote in schools in this county? Or do they vote in churches or other local buildings?
So
Local buildings? Okay. Used to it was schools in most places.
so our voting precinct is New Union Church of Christ.
There you go. There's where I'm going with that. Okay. Now, obviously, you can't stand there. I guess you could. I don't know if you do or not, but you can't really stand there and hand out religious material while people are voting. But you can sure have it on the hallway down through there, can't you? Yeah. No. You're not sure. Uh-oh. Sorry. Paul. Forget Paul's here. No, I'm just kidding.
They tell you that you can't have anything, voter information, all that stuff.
But you could sure have some pictures on the wall with some things. I see some heads nodding. Okay. Now, it may not be an opportunity to evangelize when somebody's voting, because usually that's not a very happy time for a lot of people. But it is an opportunity. Now, I'm not saying you got to open up your doors to everything like that. But there are things. Okay, so, the Northeast Tennessee flooding, the church, I think y'all helped them, didn't you? Mountain City. Okay. They became a lighthouse in the community. I went up there. I taught them what I learned from Florida. Because you got to remember, Northeast Tennessee don't get hurricanes often. I can't say they don't now, but they don't get them often. Tom actually said, "Man, we wish y'all move here." I said, "Y'all have too many hurricanes for us up here." And he said, "Aren't y'all moving to Florida?" I said, "Yeah, but we expect them there. We don't expect them in the mountains." So they became the community involvement center. We fed 500 people the very first day. 500 people. That's a town of 2,400. We reached a fifth of the entire city. Now, I'm sure people were coming from outside the city limits, but you get my point. Okay? Community involvement. Who's to say you can't have a Red Cross blood drive in the parking lot? And oh, by the way, open up your fellowship hall with orange juice and stuff for those people giving blood, right? There again, you have materials for that. Now, I'm not saying you got to. Some of y'all may not. Your elders, the elders in here, you may say that's a terrible idea, and it's okay. I'm telling you, it's my idea. It's somebody else's idea. Use it if you can. Okay. Invitation. You've seen that 2 or 3 times throughout this. You've got to invite people, and then neighborhood visits and prayer.
Some statistics that I quoted on Sunday with regard to invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Several years ago, there was a group that did a survey about why are you at this church.
Mm-hmm.
Of all of the things that were listed, nothing was more than 6% of the people who responded. And that includes, I like the preacher, I like the programs, I just happened to visit. All of those things. Gospel meeting was 1/2 of 1%.
Yep.
Somebody invited me.
Yep.
79%.
Yep. All right, let's do some statistics real quick. I know I saw you counting earlier. How many were here?
126. Oh,
No.
Here. Oh, wait.
That's a big preacher count there. I'm like, who are you counting? No. How many are here today?
That's 37.
37. Okay, we expected about 40 or so we're close. Okay, so if all 37 of you that were here today, let's say you did attend Grundy Street here, but if all 37 of you are here today invited 10 people, and they all 10 came, you wouldn't have enough seats, would you? I mean, I don't know how many
Yes.
you would, but you see what I'm saying. Not with your regular people that are here. How many's here?
600.
600? You'd be pretty close.
Be packed.
Okay. But if any of you, if all 37 of you invited nobody, how many are going to come? You're not going to expect to see that many extra people, are you? Here's the law of statistics, going back to the sales side of things. If you invite 4 people, you've got a 25% chance of them coming. Well, 25% of 4 is what? 1. If you invite 10 people, 2.5, I don't know where the half comes from, but the law of numbers will work that out. yeah, maybe a kid. But 2.5. You go to a restaurant, you say you got 2.5. But if 2.5 average people come, you now have at least 100 extra visitors. Okay, and so We got to think about that in those realistic terms. But if you invite nobody, how many come?
You always miss 100% of the shots you
Absolutely.
don't take.
Absolutely. Now, you may say, well, I invited people to our gospel meeting, or I invited people to our fall session, or I invited people to this evangelism workshop, and they didn't come. Okay, that's fine. Invite them again. Invite somebody else. On and keep on. Did Jesus stand in one spot when he was preaching and teaching? No. You know, he taught, and then he moved on. He taught, and he moved on. Now, I'm not saying that's what we do, but I'm saying that's the way you have to invite people. Okay. So certainly on the invitation side. Now, I want to cover something that might be uncomfortable for just a minute, and it's not meant at anybody to be uncomfortable, but it's just the true hard facts. And then we'll break after this, and we'll do the intentional lesson afterwards. It goes pretty fast. One of the things you have to do as a church member, as a church leader, whether you're an elder, deacon, preacher, or if you are in a congregation that doesn't have elders, deacons, and preachers, every member is going to have to be responsible for this. You need to take a virtual look through of your building. Okay? Now, there again, this is not aimed at anybody in particular, although I do have some examples I'm going to show you. And I reference these all the time, and I almost found the one that I thought I wanted to use, but I couldn't find it. There's nothing wrong with track racks. As a matter of fact, you need to have track racks. But if you've got this track by George Bailey, and it's a great track, but you see how George is dressed here, right? Okay. And this one is Why Am I a Member of the Church of Christ? And this one's in pretty good shape. It must have been behind another one that got thrown away. Usually they're like half faded, and they look like this, hanging out of the track rack. Are y'all with me? You with me? Okay. Or if you've got this, which used to be kind of a light red, it's pink, and it's the same thing, and it's wrinkled and crumpled at the top. Or if you've got these, and I'm just saying, there's nothing wrong with these. Not a thing wrong with these. You've got these, How to Become a Christian, and it says that there were 875,000 printed in English in 1988. You still got some on the wall, there's a problem. Okay? Because if there are only that many published, why are they not out? I don't know if y'all know where I'm going with this or not. We talked about AI just a few minutes ago. I am in video editing and production. I have to deal with graphics all day long, every single day. I have to update my graphics. Why? We have to update our studio sometimes. We have to do these things. Why? Why do we have to do them? Get people's attention, keep their attention. If you stay current, and if you've got those, I know I'm making that. If you've got those that are leaned over or faded in your track rack, and that's the first thing people see when they walk in the door, guess what else they're going to think? It's old news. All right. Now, on the perspective of that, on the opposite side of that, we got to be careful what tracks are in our track racks too. You can have the newest tracks out there. Allen Webster and House to House, they've got their own publishing place down in Marietta, Georgia now, right outside of, or maybe Dalton, Georgia. I don't know, but anyway, they've got their own print shop now, and they print. And I'm not advertising for House to House. I'm just saying they got the stuff. All right, they've got some really nice trifold brochures that Allen Webster's written that are really, really good. Okay, but even with those, I cringe when I walk into a church building, and the very, very first thing I see, and don't get me wrong, okay, I need y'all to hear me out before I get kicked out of the door. The very first thing I see, why is gambling a sin? What is wrong with adultery? What is wrong with drinking? Why pornography is taking over the world? And it's just back to back. What is that? Anti-everything. Now, you can have those tracks. You need to have those tracks. But maybe they need to be on this, and I'm just using this example, as you walk out the door, not when you come in the door. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Nobody's come to kick me out yet, so maybe you follow what I'm saying there. If you're going to have something out in the eye of the public, make it something that is visible, make it something that is clean, make it look like $1 million. That's the way your buildings should be looking too. Okay? They should look like, we call it the house of the Lord. But yet sometimes we treat it like a rundown house. Okay, now, I'm not saying, and there again, I want to be careful there, because we're all guilty of that, are we not? If I've been to John and Michelle's house multiple times, and I guarantee you, I've never gone into John and Michelle's house when it's not been almost spotless, if not spotless. Okay, whether they knew I was coming or not. Sometimes they didn't know I was coming, but yeah, he still got some of my tools at his house from when I was working at his house for him. But so I guess what I'm saying is, if you know visitors are coming, clean up, clean up. Okay, and that's not the preacher's job. It's not the elder's job. It's everybody's job. You may have somebody you pay to clean up. I don't know, but help them out. If you see, if you walk in and go, oh man, I wish they'd change that picture. I wish they'd buy a new clock. Okay, you donate a clock, right? I mean, we got to think about it, things like that. So, it's any questions on those types of things, real quick? Is everybody asleep, or are you just hungry? Both. All right. Well, I think we will. The wheels are turning. All right. All right. Well, so that ends this session. Now we'll come back to some of these things in the practical after the intentional evangelism session. We're going to break for lunch. John, do you want to say the prayer for lunch, or you want to do it over there? Or?
Okay, so we're going to do. Yeah,
it's 11. It's 11:30. I guess didn't you say the lunch will be ready at 11:30? Or
yes,
okay. Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll come back for the other.
Use the mic.
Yep.
Okay, in just a moment, can you kick me on, please? In just a moment, we're going to head over to the annex. If you haven't made your way over there yet, you can follow the crowd. We'll be headed that way. We've got lunch over there to eat. So appreciate the first two sessions. We'll have the other two sessions afterwards. We had planned to have three before lunch. We're actually going to have two after lunch rather than the one. So hope everybody will come back right after lunch. Let's go ahead and give thanks for our food. Would you bow with me? Father in heaven, we are so thankful for this day that you have given us, and we're so thankful for this opportunity that we have to come together to learn more about how to better be soul winners and to spread your gospel and to bring others to Christ.